name is Mona Crandell, and I was born in Canton, Ohio, December 1st, 1930. That was a long time ago. And I think I, for the most part, have enjoyed all the time from then until now. And I remember early years, and the earliest recollection that I really have, and I once asked my mother about it, and she said that she was surprised I remembered. But I know that one of the homes that we lived in was in East Liverpool, Ohio, and we were there for a short period of time. But I remember sitting on the front porch and watching the sunsets that were off in the distance, probably facing west, because that's where they are. And Mother said, that's right, that's what we used to do. We used to go out and sit on the front porch and on the steps and watch the sunsets. And that's just about all I remember of East Liverpool, Ohio. And then from East Liverpool, I think the family moved to either Youngstown, Ohio, or we moved to Canton, Ohio for a short time and then to Youngstown. But I think we went from East Liverpool to Youngstown. And Youngstown, I remember the house also had a front porch. I don't remember anything else about it. And I remember walking to a park that was about a block down the road. And at the end of the street, and I remember it was like a little waterfall. That's something that I recall. And that's all I remember about Youngstown, Ohio. And then we moved back to to Canton, and I don't even remember our first house there. But I do remember the house that we lived in, which we lived in for a pretty lengthy time. And that was when we were cat-a-corner across the street from Grandma and Grandpa, from Bub and Zeta, as we called them. And that was kind of fun because then we could have conversations with them, and we'd go over to Grandma's for cookies, and I liked to play in their yard because she had a garden, number one, and there were pretty flowers, and she always grew dill because she wanted to make her own pickles, and they were good too. And she used dill in the chicken soup, I remember, and it's hard to find fresh dill that she made without growing it. But it's hard to find it nowadays because I look for it for my chicken soup and I can't find it too often. Anyway, I remember the big hydrangea bushes that were on the side of the house, and I loved the hydrangea flowers. And I remember that house very clearly. And then our house was on the corner of the street, and that was 515 15th Street Northeast, Canton, Ohio. That was Grandma's address, and our number was 500. And what else do I remember about that house? I remember a little sunroom that the house had. I remember all the rooms. I can remember all of them. But the one thing that sticks in my mind, that probably sticks in my brother's mind also, was the fireplace in that house was white marble squares, and there on the floor part, I think that's called a hearth, on the floor part there were some loose stones, and we used to write notes and stick pennies in there. And one time, I know, not very many years ago, but quite a few years ago, when Stanley was back in town, in Canton, with the kids, he went to that house and he asked them if he could come in and see the house, and they said, sure. And I asked him if he ever went over and lifted up that stone to see if there were any notes left there and if there were any pennies, and he said he forgot all about it. But he said he didn't know whether he would do that anyway in somebody else's house at that time. And from there, I remember we moved to Harvard, and Stanley was in the service at that time. And I was in high school. And that brings me up to my high school years, really.
My name is Sol Crandell, and I was born on March 5th, 1925, at Methodist Hospital. That's the old hospital that was on Cummings Street. And
In what
my,
city?
what's that?
In what city?
In Omaha, Nebraska. And our first recollection of living in Omaha was we lived in a little stucco house on the corner of Saddle Creek and Farnham Street. And we used to play around there, and that's when Saddle Creek was a gravel road, as it wasn't improved at that time. And there was a Bond bakery that made bread that was up a little ways on Farnham there. I recall that building. And my dad originally started working for Brandeis as a furrier when he first came over, and for a short while he worked there, and then we opened up a shop on 40th and Farnham, and we lived behind the store there, and my dad had this little fur shop there, and then from there we went to I believe the address was 606 South 35th Street. We rented a duplex from Dan Miller, Dr. Dan Miller's folks, and he lived there at the time. And we lived there for a while. And then from there, we did live behind the store on 35th Street. We had a first store there. Right now, it's where the Keywood Plaza building is. And we lived back at the store there for a while. And we went from there, we went to, I think it was 10-something North 32nd Street, and we bought a little stucco house from Sam Rice. And his family, I guess he built it, that was so many years ago. And we lived there until, and my brother Meyer was with us all this time, and we lived there as a family. And then we moved from there to 60th and Poppleton. And my folks had built a duplex there, and we lived there. And I was thinking of where a family finally built a building on 36th and Farnham where they had the first store. And my brother Meyer was instrumental in putting that together for my parents. And that's where we had our first store. And I recall, it's the same place where Warren Buffett has his headquarter building. It's in the same location. And so naturally, there's no way to know that that's where their building was unless you tell them. I mean, where we lived on 36th and Farnham, and then our building still stands on 36th and Farnham. That my brother was instrumental in building there. Three stores there, and one of the stores we occupied with our first storage vault in the lower end, and it was a large storage vault. And then I reminded Norm Denenberg when we were here, because he eventually bought that building when my parents moved out of it, and my brother had passed away, and he still owns the building. He still owns the building, and when he was here last week, we chatted a little bit about it. I'm trying to think of other things that took place during this period, and I think that's some of the highlights. I imagine there's more that I can't remember at the present time.
Sol, let me ask you a question. Did your parents come from Europe?
Yes, my parents came from Russia. Minsk, Russia was the origin of my parents. In fact, our family my mother and dad went back there some time ago, quite a few years ago, on a travel.
It was in the 50s, the
In the
1950s,
50s.
somewhere in
And
there.
they went back to Minsk and they couldn't recognize it anymore. So they were trying to pick up landmarks where they knew they could associate with, and there was nothing around. So they were disappointed in that area. But Minsk, Russia was where they came from. And my grandmother, my mother's mother, lived with us at the location there by Saddle Creek in that house, at Saddle Creek in Farnham, and she lived with us for a while there.
Until she passed away.
Then she passed away. She went to the old people's home there at that time. It was off of North 24th Street. There was a Jewish old people's home.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and that's where she finally.
Did your parents marry while they were in Europe, or?
Yeah, they were married, right.
Meyer was born in
Meyer
was born in Russia.
My brother Meyer was born in Russia. Meyer was 5 years older than me. So he was born in Russia, and then when they came over, I was born in Omaha.
Do you have any background of how your father learned to be a furrier?
No, I don't, other than I had no detail of how that all came about. I don't know.
And how about your parents?
Well, my grandparents were originally from Russia also, and I don't remember the name of the shtetl. But then my grandfather on my father's side, his family was from Russia, and I guess there were several brothers, and my grandfather's name was Samuel, and Samuel and several of his brothers had planned to go to South Africa, and they all set out. Now, what I don't know is whether they all set out at exactly the same time, but I know that they set out to go to Russia, from Russia to South Africa. My grandfather had enough money to go to London, and from London they were going to go to South Africa. That was the routing that they took. Several of the brothers continued on, but Samuel did not have enough money to go, so he stayed, and he said he would work there for a while and then he would go. So my father and a couple of his brothers were born in Petticoat Lane. Petticoat Line, as I used to hear them say. And I know my Uncle Charlie, who was older than Dad, he went back to see if he could find the place or any of the places that they knew about. And he did find a registry that had the family name there. So there is some kind of court records or something that exists in Petticoat Lane. Anyway, I have never been to London other than the airport, and so someday I hope to go back there and at least see a little bit, and maybe I'll find Petticoat Lane too. Anyway, the brothers that went to South Africa, they have lost contact with. And so we have no contact with them and have no idea what happened to them or well, at this point in time, I'm sure none of them are left, but there's just, we just don't know what happened to that whole branch of the family. Now, with Dad's mother's family, there are still many relatives in Canada, and Canada is where they ended up going to from London, and to a little town not far from Toronto that's called St. Petersburg. Is that right? What did I tell you before? Did I say something about Petersburg? Peterborough, that's it. Peterborough. St. Petersburg is in Russia. Peterborough is the little town. And they knew a family there, or there was somebody else from the family that was there or something, and that's why they ended up there. So Peterborough is the little town they lived in really for quite a while. And from there they moved to Toronto, and there were many, many relatives there. Now, my mother's family was from Poland. Mother was born in Lodz, which was an industrial town, I understand. And my grandfather was, I believe, also from that area, but he was educated in Germany. He came from a very fine family, evidently, and he was educated in I can't remember the name of the place he was educated right now, but it had a title, and the title ended up on a river, was the translation. But anyway, from there they came to Ohio because they had relatives there. And the relatives that were there, I think, were not my Zeta's relatives, but my grandmother's. My grandmother's maiden name was Weintraub, and there was a branch of the family, her brother and his family settled in Canada, and their name, as it translated into the country, became Winthrop. And Uncle Sam was my Bobby's brother, and he had a son, Louis, and he had a daughter, Esther, and I remember them, and we used to visit them from time to time in Canada. And Mother went to visit them one time, and that's how she met my father. And they corresponded for evidently close to 2 years before they married. And when they married, they moved to Fremont, Ohio. And that started Daddy's travels around the country. And at the time, he was a shoe man. He managed a shoe store in Fremont, and that would lead us up to the period that he joined the family in the Pepsi-Cola business. Now what happened was, my Zeta and his family, which consisted of my Uncle Abe, the eldest, and then my mother, Frida, and then a sister of hers, Pearlie, and another sister, Sari. Now, Sari at this point is the only one that is still living. Let's see.
Mona, what did your family that lived in Canada, what did they do?
In Canton?
Yes. No, the family in Canada, when they
Canada.
arrived in Canada.
I think my Zeta, I think he was a shoemaker. I think I'm correct. Whether he had a business at that time, I don't think so. I think he was retired already at that time. So I'm not sure that he was in business in Toronto. And I never knew them in Peterborough. I only knew them in Toronto. And I heard about Peterborough. Now, he could have had a little shop in Peterborough. But I think that's where my father got his training in shoes and etc., knew about shoes. And when he left home, which was when he was 14, I think. I think he was 14 when he left. I think when he first left, he went to Chicago, and he got a job there in a shoe store, and he worked from that point on in the shoe business. until he got into the managerial part.
Sal, can you tell me about your mother's background, her maiden name?
Foreman.
Foreman was, getting back to the names again, when my parents came and they checked into Ellis Island, they asked them what, some semblance of a name that they could Americanize and give them. And they said Crandell, Krendel.
DLE.
DLE or DEL. So they translated that, whoever was taking the information, to an American name of Crandell, Crandell. A lot of people don't realize a Jewish connection with the name Crandell, so that is the name that we ended up with. Now, it happens that Crandell is a Mormon name, and it must have been on their list of names that sounded familiar. So that's how the name we got the name that I got the name Crandell, and I've never encountered another Jewish person with the name of Crandell, similar to what we have.
Did your mother and dad have sisters and brothers, Saul?
Yes, they did. They had some of them I knew and some I didn't. That gets back into my uncle was Abe Foreman, and he was
That's on your mother's side.
on my mother's side, and he was a contractor, a plastering contractor, and he was a friend of Harry Cooper. He got him in some of the work that they were doing. And my uncle Abe was the contractor on the housing project on North 24th Street, the first major housing development. And he was the plastering contractor for that project
In Omaha.
in Omaha. Now, my other uncles, I didn't know them. I just knew my uncle Abe was the only one that seemed like it was part of my life. I mean, I knew him from that standpoint, which was on my mother's side. Now, on my father's side,
Oh, wait a minute. Finish with your mother's side. Your mother had two sisters.
yeah, my mother had two sisters, and they were in Omaha in the early years, and then they went on to Tulsa, Oklahoma, and they both had grocery stores, and they lived there for many years. My Aunt Rose finally moved to Washington, D.C., where she was with her son Marcus. And my other aunt Sarah lived in Tulsa.
California.
Yeah.
They moved to California,
And they moved to California.
and she raised her whole family in California.
She raised her family there in California.
And how about on your father's side? Were there any?
No connections there at all.
I want to go back to you, Mona, and talk about your high school days.
Well, let me do a little bit of background with family names as well. When they left Russia, their name, I think I have this straight, the name was Ovchaovich. Somehow or other, it became Dovidovich. And that name translated into Davidson. How we ended up with Feinberg, we don't know. It probably was when you came through although they went through Canada. So when they came to Canada, probably whatever that immigration office was like, he probably said he wanted a fine and known. So they figured out that that's probably how he got the name Feinberg. But there is a branch of the family that evidently took the name of Davidson. And probably that's what the name should have been. It translated more with the name Davidson. Then mother's family, her maiden name was Strakowski. And that name remained Strakowski when they came from Poland. And when my grandfather was when they were in Canton, Ohio, and my grandfather was in a business, they ran a little soda shop. And it was like where they'd serve, like 2 cents plain and different ice creams. And it was a little, they didn't call them a soda shop. What did they call them in those days? It was a little, oh, good heavens, I can't think of the name.
Soda shop?
I'll call you at 2 o'clock in the morning, you'll put it into the record. Anyway, mother used to work there when she used to come home from school. She used to work in that little place that they had. Like now it's like a little candy store or a little, that type of a place. Anyway, how we got into the Pepsi-Cola business was very interesting, because one day my father and mother were then living in Fremont, Ohio. And he was managing a shoe store there. And Zeta and my Bobby naturally always wanted mother to come back home and to be, in Canton, and why should she be in a tiny little town, as if Canton was big. But why should she be in a tiny little town in Fremont where there aren't very many Jews, and all that sort of a story. So anyway, one day Daddy he used to have his lunch across the street in a drugstore that had a fountain. And he used to go there and have his lunch. Well, one day when he came in, the manager there that ran it said, "Hey Bob," he said, "I got a new drink here." He says, "I want you to give it a try and tell me what you think of it." So he had it, and he liked it. He says, "Hey, I like that. Give me another one." So he had another one, and he said, "This is a real good drink." He says, "The guy wants me to put it in, and it's a new drink in town, and it's new around, and, he's gonna start off, and they're gonna," he says, "I don't think they're ever gonna surpass Coca-Cola, but, they're trying." So anyway, Daddy went home, told Mother about it, and then he called my grandfather, and he said, "You've always wanted me to come back to Canton," and he said, "I'll tell you what, I'll join the family if you put in this new drink." He said, "It's called Pepsi-Cola," and he said, "I think we can get a good franchise out of it." And he said, "If you put that in, I'll come and help get it started, and we'll have a bottling plant." And they did have a small bottling plant anyway. And they used to bottle different flavored drinks, and they were called Stricky beverages.
And soda water, too.
And soda water. Stricky, out of the siphon bottles. Remember the old siphon bottle? And they got to the name Stricky because that's what friends used to call them, because they didn't go through the whole long name of Strakowski. It was a shortened version of Strakowski. And that's how they went back to Canton, Ohio, and that's where we were born, that's where we were raised, and there were times when we went elsewhere, but then came back. Okay, that's that story. Now, my high school years, I was 2 years in McKinley High School, which was famous for McKinley Bulldogs, and they were famous for playing Massillon, Ohio, which was their big football game. And Massillon, Ohio, if I'm not mistaken, is famous for Jim Thorpe. That's where he came from. Just a little bit of, something in there. And McKinley was named after President McKinley, who was a president and he was the one that was assassinated, one of the first assassinations of American presidents. And let's see, I went 2 years there. Stanley graduated from there, and I went there for 2 years, and then I transferred to Lehman High School because we had moved out of that house that was cat-a-corner from Grandma and Grandpa, Bob and Zeta. And let's see, I finished those 2 years there and then went to Kent State University. By that time, Daddy was leaving the business then. Zeta had passed away many years ago because it was Stanley's, shortly after Stanley's bar mitzvah, I think, that Zeta passed away. And let's see, I'm trying to think chronologically, and it's not too easy anymore, you know? They say you remember the old years better, but you don't remember them all that clearly either. And I think I'm going chronologically pretty well. Anyway, after that, we moved to Omaha, Nebraska, because Daddy purchased a plant there and left the plant in Canton. And we used to laugh because Daddy would go to different places to see different plants when he was looking and shopping around to what franchise to buy. And when he came up with Omaha, Nebraska, we said, Omaha? Who ever heard of Omaha? Omaha? I had people ask me if we were going to live on a reservation. I had people ask me if we were joining an Indian tribe. I mean, I can't begin to tell you some of the questions that came to me from Canton, Ohio. But anyway, we moved to Omaha, and that was where I went to college my first year because I wanted to, my first year I was at Kent, and I transferred my credits of the first year. So I started my second year at Omaha U because I was going to go to University of Omaha, University in Lincoln, and I said, you know what? I'm brand new here in town, and I'm having an awful lot of fun going out with an awful lot of different guys, and I think I'll just stay here while everybody else is gone, and I can continue learning more and seeing more of Omaha, and that's how I got to Omaha U, and I graduated from there with a BA degree. I never exercised it, I majored in speech therapy, and originally I went thinking I was going to be a social worker, and I took sociology courses. One of the things we did in criminology class was go to the prison in Lincoln, and that was the most horrible experience. And I decided, you know, this isn't for me after all, and I decided to do something else, and I went into speech therapy. However, I also at that time started just for fun and extra courses. I took a lot of home ec courses, and I met a wonderful teacher. Her name was Miss Killian, and she was very well known in Omaha. Her name was Margaret Killian, and I think she wrote a book, if I'm not mistaken. I think I have a copy of it. And she really intrigued me. I just loved her. I thought she was great. And I remember her very fondly. Anyway, I ended up taking all the home ec courses as my extras, and I had a minor in home ec and a minor in sociology, and my major was speech pathology. And I never exercised the speech pathology. I don't know if my volunteer work in organizations has something to do with the social work, so I'll say that it did. But somehow or other, the home ec courses just got into my skin, and I loved the cooking courses, and I learned a lot of cooking, of course, from my mother. and Jewish dishes and things of that. But I really learned an awful lot of things that I got from Miss Killian as well. And those are the things I remember about my college days.
How about you, Sol? Where did you go to high school?
My background in college is not quite elaborate and detailed as Mona's is. But when I got back from the service, I graduated high school. I went to high school from 1939 to 43 to Central High School. I went to Columbian School, was my grade school, and over on 38th and Jones. And it was a very, very good grade school. In my class was Letitia Baldridge, who became social secretary for Jacqueline Kennedy. And we had a nice group there, and I graduated there. And from then on, I went to high school at Central High School, and I went my 4 years there. And
What were some of the highlights of your high school days?
well, I was on the track team, and I liked athletics, and I worked part-time at the store when I wasn't after school and so forth. And there was nothing really exceptional in my high school days. I was just an average student, and but from then on, I graduated, and there was a little interim period before I went into the service. And then I was in the service, and was in the service for about it was nearly 3 years, and went overseas in India, and was there for about 2 years. And, I was in the Air Force, military police, and I felt it was pretty good duty, and it was in a little place called Barrackpore outside of Calcutta, and that's where they assembled planes that were coming in the Hooghly River and getting them kind of put together and then flying them over the hump into China. And I was there all during my period of overseas duty. And then when I came back, I went into, I went to Nebraska, Lincoln for a year and pledged Sammy there. And I was in the pledge class, and happened Eddie Zorinsky was in the same pledge class that I was at. And I was there for about a year. My folks wanted me back in Omaha. They needed help at the store and so forth. So I went my year at Lincoln, and then I came back to Omaha, and
Worked in the store.
at the store. And then I was part of the family store there until all that time, and for the many years. And that was about the extent of my working experience.
What specifically did you do in the store?
Well,
Everything.
I did
A little of all, but
I was kind of everything there. I went to New York for fur trade school for a year, and got my diploma there in fur cutting and so forth, but never pursued it. It didn't have that much interest for me in that kind of work, so I did graduate the American Mitchell Sol Vogel School on 7th Avenue, and was taught to be a furrier, a fur cutter, and a fur operator. So that was my extent of work in the business. So I just stayed with the business all the time, and our family was very close and tight and very business oriented. And so that's where I was, and that's where I ended up in that respect.
Where did you meet Mona?
That's another story.
I want to hear both versions.
Yeah. Well, before you go to that, let me add something that Saul said. I think one of the reasons he didn't go into the fur cutting all that much, his father did a lot of that. His father really had golden hands. In those days, they always used to say golden hands. And he was such a master at working the furs and making the garments and creating all these the different garments that they sold retail. And I think, you know, there's only so much room and so many things, you know, that one person can do. And since he was so good, that's what he did. That was really his training. Now, where he got his...
Excuse me, in a small, closely knit family business that we were, that's Mona explained my particular place in it, so.
And I think that's why he didn't go into that after he had gone to the school and learned all of that. But at least he understood the furs and how the furs were made. And they were very, you know, the family each had their own specialty more or less. And I think that had a lot to do with it because his father was really so good at it. And there was really enough work there for one person at the time. At the time he started out, it later got larger and they had more people, but that's, you know, that's just the way it grew. But gee, there was something I thought of while he was talking that I wanted to say and I forgot what it was. Well, whatever it was. I'll tell you when I call you at 2 o'clock. Anyway, as to meeting us, as to our meeting, well, Saul will have to tell his version of it. But my version of it was a very hot day in Omaha, Nebraska. And it was 102 degrees and it was on a Sunday. And it was hot. I mean to tell you, hot.
I agree with that.
And Omaha is not like Phoenix where it's nice and dry and, you know, dry heat. Omaha is very humid. And so 102 there is like 120 here, or something like that anyway. And I went to the plant because I worked in the plant at that time. I was already graduated from college. And
Mona was a one-person office. That was it. I mean, there wasn't.
I ran the whole office. All right. Now, the system that we had, a lot of the what's it called? The distributors. A lot of the distributors would come in on Sunday and get their loads to carry them through for the week in their territories. And then the drivers that we had in the city were also distributors. They owned their own trucks and they came in to us for their merchandise, and they came in on a daily basis. But they would also come in and get a larger load on Sundays. So our plant actually worked on Sunday. The bottling end of it rarely worked on Sunday except in the heat of summer, because you had to continue to produce because this was your top part of the year. That was your season. Okay, I'm in the office and there's no air conditioning in those days, and there was certainly no air conditioning in that plant. And I was in a little sundress, and I recall my hair was long in those days and I wore it in a ponytail, and I took the ponytail and flipped it up because I couldn't even stand the hair on the back of my neck. It was just so hot. And I had no makeup on. I was really a sight to behold, I'm sure. And there I am at the desk working with the adding machine and working on the men's reports as they came in, what they brought, what they brought in, what they went out with, etc.
Let me interject one thing. This whole system was very unique as far as any bottler doing anything like it in the country. This was a totally my father-in-law's way of working the business and doing it in a way that he felt that was resourceful and had potential for growth. And it stayed that way all the way through from beginning to end.
Well, I'll back up a little bit on that, and that is that when Daddy bought the business, he bought it from a seal test company, Harding
Harding Ice cream company.
Ice cream seal test. Now, they let the business run down during the war years because they were using, their seal test ice cream was their major allocation, and that's a good word. And they would take some of their sugar, there was sugar rationing during that war, which is something our kids don't remember, but because they've never experienced living in a rationing area. And they would take some of the sugar rationing that they had for the Pepsi, they would take and use it for their ice cream so that they could produce more ice cream than anybody else was producing at that time in that community. So little by little, they let Pepsi run down. And unfortunately, the Pepsi franchise was at a disadvantage then. And to start a franchise from scratch would have been easier than taking over something that unfortunately had built a lot of ill will.
Overcome.
And you had to overcome that and then grow from there. So my father's idea was if he could get the drivers, instead of being drivers under his payroll, if they would own their own trucks, which he also then did not have to buy, but if they would own their trucks and they would be their own business people, number one, they would be independent. Number two, they would be more anxious to service the accounts and to build because it was their own, and they knew the more they did, the more they got, which is just normal in any business. So that's why he devised the fact that instead of having only distributors in the outlying areas, we had 22 counties in our franchise. We had a pretty big franchise, but little did we know Omaha was the biggest city, and from then on, we think when they gave us the figures, they were including a few herd of cattle. But that's beside the point. That was our family joke.
It went into Missouri too.
But we had some in Iowa and Missouri and Nebraska. I think we had 1 or 2 counties in Missouri. Anyway, so the outlying areas having distributorships was not brand new, but Daddy was very instrumental in getting a lot of the franchises to turn completely into distributorships, which is what he did. And it actually did help him to grow bigger and faster than it would have been had he tried to do it in the normal, regular business way that they did large cities. Okay, that's explaining that. Now, where were we? We were going to talk about what? It was, how we met. Okay, so I was in the office on a Sunday, and I think when you hear Saul's end of the story, it was because he was with a bunch of fellas and they were going out to what's the name of that little place on the way to Lincoln? That little...
this was a place, you mean in Omaha?
It was outside of Omaha. That's where you went swimming.
Oh, you mean Lenoma Beach?
Lenoma Beach.
Okay.
Well, that's where you went. That's where you were.
Okay, go ahead.
That's where you told me you were. Now it's going to come out you were someplace else? Well, okay. All right. Well,
really,
anyway, they were drinking beer.
We were at a bar drinking beer.
You were in a bar? You weren't swimming?
Drinking beer.
I know you were drinking beer. That I know.
Continue.
Okay, anyway, I don't know, I guess when guys get together, what are they gonna talk about? They're gonna talk about girls. So anyway, Saul must have said something or other about, any girls to date or whatever, I don't know.
Is there a
Anyway,
new
I wasn't,
girl? There's a new
I
girl
was,
in
I
town.
wasn't there, so I can't say.
Okay.
But they said, gee, did you ever meet Mona Feinberg? She's new in town. Oh, really? Okay, all right. Anyway, they decided that he should meet me. So he called up at home, and Mother said, no, she's not home, but you could call her at the office. She's at the Pepsi-Cola office working. So my side of the story is, Saul said to himself, hey, a girl that's gonna work on Sunday on a hot day like this, that's for me.
That's worth looking into.
That's worth looking into. So I look up from my desk, we're back at the office now, I look up from my desk and I see these 3 guys walking in. And one of them was Saul, and they introduced themselves. 2 of them, the other 2 I knew, I had met them before. And I don't know, we sat and talked for a little while. I think we talked for a little while, and Saul said, what are you doing tonight? I'd like to go out with you. So I said, well, I'm going to a party. This was shortly after graduation from college. And a friend of mine is leaving for Chicago, and she graduated with me, and she's having a party tonight. If you want to come with me, that's fine. We'll go, you can go with me. So he said, okay, and that was the beginning, and that's how we met. On a day of a very high heat and humidity, and anybody that would ask me out with the way I looked sitting behind that desk, and in order to be able to work at all, I had this little portable fan that I had blowing directly on my face, so at least I could get through the work that I was doing, and the sweat was still pouring down. So I must have been a beautiful sight. Okay.
One question, Mona.
Yeah.
Was it love at first sight?
No.
Okay, Sal, now I want your version.
But he was cute.
This is worth looking into. She's pretty.
Isn't that nice?
She's pretty, and she looks like she's the kind that would fit in very nicely with my life. And there were rolls
As my wife, not with my wife.
as my wife, and there was rolls of adding machine paper all around the floor in front of her. So that added to the picture.
And then how much later was it until you got married?
Well, that was in June, and he proposed in October, and we were married in April.
So it was pretty fast,
Fairly, yeah.
further fast.
After the wedding, did you continue working at Pepsi?
Oh, of course.
And you stayed, of course, in the fur business.
He stayed in the fur business, and I went to the office every day, and until I got pregnant with Janie, I worked in the office all that time. And then afterwards, I worked periodically. I mean, I was still on the payroll, and I would go in and do work from time to time. I did that until we sold the business practically, which was many, many years later.
I would like each of you to tell me a little more detail about your parents, the kind of persons they were and kind of things they did. Can you do that, Sal? Tell me about your mother and dad.
My father was more laid back. My mother was more of the aggressive and type of person. And she was the leader, or I would say the leader of the family. And
Matriarch.
matriarch, you can give it whatever name you want. And that part of it. My brother Meyer, his route, he was in the service, and he went to OCS, Officers Candidate School, and when he left the service, I think he was a major. He had already promoted himself to captain, and he did overseas. He was in the European, and he was in the Quartermaster Corps, and he did his share of military service and all, and he went the route and became a higher rank as he moved up the ladder. And he was a driver. He was not a driver in driving a vehicle, but he was a pusher and a goer and a doer. And as far as the rest of the family was concerned, it was that's really more or less of my intimate family. We were very business dedicated and spent time working at the store and even going on Sundays and doing paperwork and things like that.
And Mona, you tell me about your parents.
Well, let me add a little bit about Saul's parents that he hasn't included. Number one, they did have a group of friends who were also from Russia, and they had a lot of things in common, as they did in those days. And they belonged to a group that was called Omaha Choir and Dramatic Club. And in younger years, this was not in my time, but in younger years when Saul was growing up, they would put on plays for the Jewish community. And my mother-in-law, being the actress that she was, which today we would call drama queen, she was always in the plays, and they always did these dramas. And
she loved to be in that role.
Yeah, she liked to act, and she liked that sort of life. And before I forget, one of the things that I wanted to say before was that her mother ran a catering. This was in Russia. She ran a catering type of business that your mother told me about. Her mother made meals, and I don't know if she actually had a restaurant, but it had something to do with that kind of thing. It was food involved, and I know that she catered for people. So I just wanted to stick that in so that the kids would know that they had catering in the family. Well, let's see. Let's talk about Mom and Dad. I told you earlier that Mom and Dad met in Toronto when Mother went there for a vacation to visit her cousins. And they met, and they started writing each other evidently immediately afterwards. They both said it was love at first sight for them, and it might well have been. But Daddy wrote Mother a lot of wonderful, wonderful, wonderful love letters. And Stanley and I had both read them. And Stanley, actually, I'll tell a little secret on him. When he was writing Claire, after he had met Claire in Florida, she was in New York and he was in Omaha, and he would write her as well as go to visit and etc. And I'm sure they spoke on the phone. And he said, "Hey Dad, can I copy some of your letters?" They were really great letters. They were terrific. Anyway, the time came that Mother said it was time to burn them, or time to throw them away or something, and it was. I think it was somewhere around the time that she moved out of Omaha, or just a little bit earlier than that. And Stanley and I, neither one of us wanted her to destroy them. And I says, don't get rid of them. But anyway, I guess she did. She kept a couple of them, but anyway, they were great. They were just great. So I really do believe that it was a great love for the both of them. Anyway, Daddy was very industrious. He was very ambitious. He worked hard. He was not afraid to work. He enjoyed his lazy times. He enjoyed life, and he enjoyed people. And he had a very, pardon me, strong feeling for Israel and for Jewish people. And he devoted most of his energies in that direction, though he was active in things in Omaha that were not Jewish organizations. For instance, oh boy, look at that wind. For instance, he was on the committee for the zoo. He was on the Boys Club. He was on, he was on executive committees for all these organizations. He was a Mason. He was in,
He was totally
National
involved.
Conference of Christians and Jews, NCCJ, I think it's called. And he was really, he was interested, and he was on Rotary. He was just interested in people, and he was interested in doing good. And he always said that, you know, life has been good to him, and when life is good to you, you've got to give something back to your community and to your people and to your generation and to the generations to come. And he felt very strongly about that. Mother was the quiet woman behind the man, but don't think for 1 minute that she wasn't smart, because she was. She just let Daddy be in the front row and be the star. And but she was a great lady, and a lady she was. There's no doubt about that. She was definitely a lady. She was prim and proper in many ways, and she enjoyed the things, and only felt badly that she always felt she wasn't strong enough to do a lot of things that she would have liked to have done. And that strength, somehow or other, I don't know what she was referring to, but when she passed away, being just short of 102, something was real strong, and definitely her heart was real strong, and her heart was big as well. I'm not speaking literally, but her heart was big for people, and for doing things and caring about people and caring about others. She worked on some committees. I seem to recall that she worked, I remember her working on some committees when we first moved to Omaha. She worked on committees for Bethel. I don't know if, she was never on an executive board, I don't think. But in any event, I know that she did go to some of those things. And she was active in, and a member of Hadassah and Bethel Sisterhood and National Conference. And there was another one. What was the other one? Federation. How can I forget Federation? It's so big. Anyway, and quite frankly, following in their footsteps, because an awful lot of it must have rubbed off on me, I was a co-president with Thelma Lustgarten of Hadassah for a couple of years, and I think we did a pretty good job. I hope others think the same. And I was a vice president, Temple Sisterhood, Bethel, and I've done my part and I know I worked in Federation there also, and that was my years in Omaha. And actually, my time here, I am also doing a lot of organizational work. I was on not executive board, I was on the board for Brandeis. Daddy also was on the board at Brandeis University when Abe Sacker was the president. He worked for that organization also. And another one that he worked very, very hard for was Hebrew University in Israel. He was a strong Zionist. He believed in education, as both of my parents did, and he really felt that Hebrew University was a very important thing for the world as well as for Israel, and for Israel to have a strong Hebrew University. And he was recognized for the work that he did by Hebrew University, and I can't remember right now the year that the dinner was in Omaha, and it was really a very nice affair, I recall. Anyway, he was recognized for those things, and there is a rotunda in the university, in the English building, that was given by Morris Messing and his wife when they dedicated that building. There was also a rotunda that was dedicated to Mother and Daddy for their work at Hebrew University, and Daddy was the one that interested Mo Messing into being active for Hebrew University, and that was his thank you for it. That was Mo's thank you to Mother and Daddy for interesting him in Hebrew University, because he became a very big philanthropist for them also. What else can I tell you about them? Dad was a strong disciplinarian. Mother was a disciplinarian too, but much softer. They were fun. They were fun to be with whenever they went someplace and came back, and you know how you tell the stories of what you did and what you saw and where you were and you know what happened. I always wanted Daddy to tell the stories because he embellished. And his embellishments were much more fun than Mother's just strict telling us what happened. And
One about Israel, but he got off the plane.
Oh.
That's an interesting
There is
one.
a story about Daddy. Mother and Daddy had gone to Israel. I would say something like maybe, I don't know, maybe somewhere around 20 trips. I know they started traveling quite early to Israel. There was one time, they always went together, and there was one time that there was something that Hebrew University was doing, or there was a rededication or something. I can't quite recall the occasion, but I know that it was like they would be coming home 2 days before Pesach. Well, that meant to Mother that how is she going to get everything ready in 2 days, and she can't change the dishes and do this and do the cooking and do that, and there's all these things she can't possibly. There's no way she can possibly do that. So she said she can't go to Israel that trip. Well, Daddy wanted to go, and so he said he would go that time himself. Well, it wasn't that easy. He had already had his, I think he had already had his amputation. Maybe not. No, I don't think he had. No, that wasn't the trip. That wasn't that trip. All right, I'm mixing something up there. Anyway, he took this trip. Well, before the trip, there was a meeting that he attended in New York, and it was formal. He had his tuxedo. Well, the arrangement to make his plane on time, he had no time to change from his tuxedo into traveling clothes, so he took the trip to Israel in his tuxedo. When he got to Israel, and there were several others that were in the group that were going also, the others, their luggage came in time, and Daddy's luggage did not. So he was at the airport and he waited and he told the others to go on. And he waited until they found his luggage. They finally found his suitcase, and by that time he was the last one that was left, so he took a cab to, from Tel Aviv, they were going to Jerusalem. Well, he gets in the cab, and the driver, Daddy sensed right away, did not know where the hotel was that he was going to. So he says that you'd find it, you know, he'll find it, he'll find it. Well, he was an Arab, and Daddy got a little frightened at that. It was very late at night and very dark. And they finally came to a place that was the wrong hotel, so they went someplace else. And then there was a place that they came to, and he said, "Here, you'll stay here. This is the back door to the hotel." So he said, "You'll go into the hotel, into this back door," and he said, "They'll take care of you. It's the back door." So he leaves Daddy off, and Daddy goes in, and the cab driver drove off right away. And he goes in there, and it's a monastery. It wasn't the hotel. And so they said, "We'll take care of you for this evening. Don't worry about it. We'll give you a place to sleep, a place to rest." So they put him in one of these little cubicle rooms, and a hard bed, and he's still in his tuxedo, and he's carrying his suitcase, and there he is in the monastery. The next morning, they told him they got a driver for him, and they told him where he needed to go to get to the hotel that he was supposed to go to. So that was one of our famous stories in the family about when Daddy travels without Mother, the trouble he gets into. So that was one of his really interesting tales about a trip to Israel. Anyway, what else can I tell you?
I think that I know that your parents were very significant people in the building of Bethel.
No, I don't think so. They were. In what way? Bethel was. We don't go that far back.
No, and not in the original, but I mean in the new synagogue.
Oh, in the new synagogue. Oh, you mean? Oh, I see. Well, Daddy was not living at the time. When they first started the first campaign, that campaign, didn't go through, if you recall. And there was another campaign later. But later on, by that time, Daddy had passed away. And that campaign started to fail also. And Mother was, at that point, we already knew that Mother was going to move to Phoenix with us. We were already here, and she would winter here, but it was time for her to give up the house and move to Phoenix and be here also. Stanley and his family were gone from Omaha, and we were pretty well on a permanent basis of living here already. So, Mother talked to Yale Richards, and she said that she would turn her house, her home, over to Bethel, and whatever price they would get for it, not to go below, I forget whatever that price was, not to go below X number of dollars. They should sell it for whatever they could get for it, and that would be for the sanctuary. So it was arranged that since that was spurring it, giving more food for the campaign, a lot of people after that realized that it was going to take place, and the pledges started coming in again, and that's how Bethel was able to really continue and go on with their plans for the building. And the sanctuary was named after Mother and Daddy. Now, Mother didn't want the sanctuary named after her. She wanted it just to be Daddy's name. But Stanley and I were really against that. We wanted it to be Mother and Daddy, and that's what it was. So in a way, they were instrumental in seeing, Mother was instrumental in seeing that the Bethel did get built. And that's the new Bethel.
And the entryway, above the entryway has the name and the plaque.
The doors opening to the
Above.
sanctuary, right above it is their name. And that's how they were instrumental in that.
I want to change the subject just a little bit.
Okay.
I know you met, you were engaged, you got married. I want to hear about the wedding.
Well, the wedding was, oh, you're really changing. The wedding was April 12th, and April usually is a nice month, but it was a very, very cold week. However, the day of the wedding, the sun came out. It was absolutely beautiful. When we left the next day on our honeymoon, there was a snowstorm. We got out of town just ahead of it, but they had a big snowstorm right afterwards. So that one day that year was the only day that was really nice for a couple of weeks. And that was kind of a nice beginning. We felt that was an omen.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
we
We drove to,
Eureka's.
well, never mind
No,
where we went.
No, it doesn't. But
To this
it
day.
was a different, unique place, and when I read about it, it was it was a place to nice and relax and lay back a little bit and so forth after the wedding. And it was Eureka Springs, Arkansas. And
Now, Eureka Springs, Arkansas is known for a couple of things. Number one, there's one street, and it's the only street, and it winds around enough that it's that's
connects
all there is. It connects everything.
with the hillside, with every part of the other city, that one street
rest of the
connects,
city,
including
yeah.
the homes and the hotels and everything else,
Right.
are all connected to
Now,
this winding road.
The hotel that we stayed in was an old building, but they advertised that every floor was a ground floor. Now, how do you have a building that every floor is a ground floor? You're built into the side of a mountain. And they had it arranged so that every floor went out to one level of the mountain.
It was
So
written
that's how they
in
could-
Ripley's, believe it or not.
Yeah, believe it or not, it was written. Now, believe it or not, after we got there, I couldn't believe it or not that that place was still standing because it was falling apart. But we stayed there one night, and the next morning, the first thing we did was go looking for another hotel, which we did. But we did stay in that hotel that night. That was very interesting. Eureka Springs, Arkansas. Well, other than that, there wasn't a whole lot to do in Eureka Springs, but we did go, we sort of headquartered there and just drove around different towns that were around there, different places of interest.
How about the ceremony itself?
Ceremony itself was, well,
Rabbi
it was
Kripke.
quite lovely. Rabbi Kripke and Cantor,
Edgar,
no, it wasn't Cantor Edgar, it was Nyman. No, it wasn't.
could have been that.
It couldn't have been Nyman.
He came later.
He came, right, so it must have been Edgar. You're right, it was Edgar, it was Edgar. Anyway, it was just, it was a very nice ceremony.
Is it the Blackstone?
No, it wasn't. It was at Bethel.
Oh, Bethel was
The
a ceremony.
ceremony was at Bethel, and
But
the reception
was at the
afterwards was at the Blackstone.
Blackstone.
Remember the Blackstone Hotel and the ballroom upstairs?
Who were your attendants?
Well, Meyer's wife, Phyllis Crandell, was my matron of honor. And my cousin from Fern Phillips from Canada was attendant. And Fern Sperling, who is on mother's side of the family, Fern Phillips was on daddy's side of the family. And Fern Sperling at that time was, I don't know, maybe she was 5. But whatever she was absolutely darling. And she was our flower girl. And let's see, Meyer was best man, and Stanley was a groomsman. I think that was it. It was small. It was small, but it was nice. And a lot of the family came in. Somebody I remembered couldn't get in. There was a snowstorm, must have been someplace in Canada, that they didn't come. So there was, it was the weather that time of year that was kind of
Flaky.
yeah. It was, you'd get hot, you'd get cold. As I said, it was snowing before and it was snowing after, but that day was gorgeous. In talking about the things that Daddy did and how he worked for the community and how he worked for the Jewish people as well, and Mother did too. They were both always interested, as were my grandparents, always interested in education. Education meant a great deal to them. Something that Saul and I had always talked about or had spoken about previously. After Mother passed away, we decided that was the time that we wanted to do something and give something to our community here that our grandchildren were growing up in, as well as our children had spent time at the temple as well. And though not this temple, when we first came, we were affiliated with the conservative temple here, also named Bethel. And then later we changed to the temple at Temple High. We decided that we would approach Rabbi Burke to find out what sort of thing. I assumed that the rabbi had a wish list. And so we made an appointment with him, and we came in and sat down and we talked a little bit, and then I said, well, the purpose of our visit today is I want to know if you have a wish list and what you have on your wish list, because we want to donate X number of dollars as a gift to Temple, but we want to name something in memory and to honor my parents. So he named several different things that could be done, and I eliminated one, and I eliminated the second, and I eliminated the third. And the fourth thing appealed to me a great deal because it was much like Mother and Daddy, and it was a lot of what they themselves felt strongly about. They felt strongly about Jewish education, that children and families need to have a Jewish education. And Rabbi Burke felt very strongly that families should learn together, that parents should not just drive up and drop off their kids and drive away, that they should be educated to a great deal together and learn things together so that they know, so the children know that education doesn't stop at a certain age and then you have your children and drive away. And that it's not just for children, education is for grown-ups as well. and families, and as a family unit. So he had instigated the start of a family learning program, which says that, or the form that it takes, is that there are classes that when children are dropped off for Hebrew school, there are classes that parents go to, and there are classes that the children go to. And then there are classes that the children and the parents together go to, so that it actually becomes a family learning center. His dream was that there would be the beginning of a campus, and the beginning of that campus to be on Bethel property and to house many things. But one of the basic things that he wanted it to house was a family learning center. So we gave X number of dollars to Temple High to name this building the Frida and Robert Feinberg Family Learning Center. And that's how that came about. He also felt strongly many years ago, and they started a program called the Shalom Center. And it is housed in the same building right now. And someday he hopes that they will have their own building. But the Shalom Center is something that Reform Judaism has picked up across the country. And they are a caring committee, and they have many programs that deal with intermarriage as well as illnesses, as well as visiting the sick and how to conduct yourself in those situations. And they have programs that care for families who are in need, as well as families who are in need emotionally, as well as physically, and as well as financially. And the Family Learning Center encompasses a large group of the congregation, because it's really pretty much a young congregation. There are more younger and young marrieds with children than there are elderly, but the elderly are well represented as well. His idea is to have a full campus that would eventually house a Beit Midrash, as well as Shalom Center having their own building, now that the Family Learning Center has their own building. And these are also used as Talmud Torah buildings. It is a program that is, again, being picked up by temples and synagogues across the country. And they started here with Rabbi Burke in Scottsdale, Arizona, and Phoenix. You know, when we were talking about things that Mother and Daddy gave to the community that they lived in, and they so loved being in Omaha, and the friends that they made there, and the people that they associated with, and they really got into a lot of community living and things that the community wanted and needed.
They integrated into the
Absolutely.
Omaha.
And there were several things that Daddy certainly spearheaded the original campaigns for, or the gathering of the monies to start. And Omaha did not have a religious school, a parochial school for kids who could go to school and learn through and see the things that they were being taught through Jewish eyes, and to have the Jewish education without having to go to a cheder, as I went to and my brother went to when we were younger. And I remember when Dr. Shapiro and Daddy really spearheaded the campaign for starting a school which is today the Crandell Sol. And I also can remember after Daddy passed away, Mother donated a wing at the Blumpkin home in memory of Daddy, and it's called the Feinberg Wing. And there were other things that they started because they felt the community was small, but it was certainly growing, and Omaha at one time had a much larger community than it had when we moved there. Even it had dwindled a little bit by that time, but there were things that they felt they needed, and again, the educational things were very important to them, and so the health and the education of the Jewish community was uppermost in their minds, and they worked towards those things as well.
I think the word that describes that is they enriched.
Absolutely,
community.
it's a very good, A+ on that one. Also, when the new Jewish Community Center was being built, Mother and Daddy gave the money for the library, and that was important to them. Again, books, education, reading. I think is a gift that you get, and if you do a lot of reading, it can take the place of an awful lot of things. You can go to the whole world, the whole universe by reading, and it was just something that was important to them, and that's part of why we carried on and felt that we wanted to carry on this family learning center, and that was really a very good thing for them, that they would have enjoyed having that kind of a building dedicated to them. Okay, now I think we left off talking about Mother and Daddy and the things that they did, and some of the things that we did. And I think now we ought to talk about the children. And I'll start chronologically. Janie was born March 20th, 1955. And it was on a very, very snowy day, and the planes weren't really flying anymore that day, and Mother and Daddy had gone to Canton, Ohio, because our cousin Manny was having his bar mitzvah. And Manny was Aunt Pearlie's son, and it was the first bar mitzvah since Stanley's bar mitzvah in the family. And I said, "Oh, go on, you go, Mom. You know, no, she wanted to stay if this is her first grandchild and blah, 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 and all of that story." And I said, "No, go, I'm slow at everything I do, so this will be a little bit later." And the date of the bar mitzvah was actually my due date. And so anyway, I finally talked them into going, so they went to the bar mitzvah in Canton. And sure enough, after they got there, they had a phone call that I went to the hospital, and it was time for our daughter to be born. Well, they tried to fly home, and they couldn't fly home, so they got hold of a train schedule, and they took the train, and I think the train got them as far as Kansas City, and they got a bus and got back to, I think it was the Clarkson Hospital that she was born in, wasn't she? The old Clarkson?
Who, Janie?
Janie, yeah. Okay, the old Clarkson. Anyway, as I was coming out of the, give me the word, when you're coming out of the,
Labor,
no, not coming out of there, after she was born and I woke up.
recovery room.
Recovery room, but what is it, you're coming out of the,
Anesthetic.
Anesthesia.
anesthetic, thank you. As I was coming out of it, I kept on saying, are the planes flying? Are the planes flying? Are they landing? Anyway, way into the night, Mother and Daddy got there and they went immediately to the hospital. And so that was the start of life with Janie. And Janie was a delight. She was a fun child to have around. And she had little black curls all over her head. And she had a lot of likes, and there are a lot of things she liked to do, and she liked to play a lot, and she liked musical things, and she was sort of that kind of a child that was just a lot of fun to play games with and to be with. And her, when she started school, her school days were good. She was a good student, and she brought home nice report cards and good reports, and it was always nice to go and have the conferences with the teachers because she was a good student. She was good in school as well, with her subjects as well as being a good student to have in the classroom. And she grew up and went to college and graduated college the first time, and got married and later graduated college. She graduated as a certified dietitian.
Registered dietitian.
Registered dietitian.
She went to the
Certification.
University of Missouri.
That's right. She
the
graduated.
program.
And she was at the University of Missouri. She started out at University of Texas in Austin, and she was there for 2 years and then came home, and she had met her husband and they got married with the promise that she would finish school, and she did. They lived in Missouri, and she finished at the university there.
In Columbia.
Columbia, Missouri. And that's where Robin was born. Now, Robin was also an adorable child with little curls, and I won't go into her lifetime, but she was also a good student. She followed in her mother's footsteps, and she graduated cum laude from Brandeis University, and with her eye on the State Department. And she worked for 2 years for APN in Washington, D.C., which is Americans for Peace Now, which is the sister organization to Shalom Achshav, or Achshav Shalom, I forget which it is, in Israel. And did very well there. She was a secretary to the president, and then she decided she wanted to go to Israel and brush up on her Hebrew so that she would know that language very conversationally, and she did that. Previous to that, in her junior year in college, she went to the summertime, she went to Morocco and went to the university there so that she would learn Arabic, because she had her eye on doing work in the Mideast and Israel, and wanted to do something for Israel and hopefully settle all the things that the rest of the world hasn't been able to settle. She is now finished with 2 years of being in Israel and also attending Hebrew University there. And she is studying at USC getting a master's in business and going to HUC, Hebrew Union College, at the same time getting her master's in a master program that includes community services, with the intention at this point in time of working to help Jewish organizations that help Jewish people, particularly here and in Israel. She has given up the idea of the State Department for the time being anyway. That's that part of the family. Then we will go to when Beth was born, and she was born May 15th, 1958. That's right. And she was also a delightful child. Different than Janie, but that's fine. And instead of a musical bent, her talent went to artwork, and she always used to draw little pictures and leave me little notes with little flowers on them and things of that sort when she was growing up. She didn't have any curls, as I recall, and she was blondish when she was born and remained blondish for quite a few years. And I would say by the time she started school, I think by that time her hair was pretty dark already. But anyway, she was born a blonde, and there are blondes in the family. Let's see. She went to the University of Miami.
At Coral Gables.
In Coral Gables, and her first year did not like it that much and transferred to the University of Arizona in Tucson.
She went into an art program at the University of Miami.
Right, and she wanted the University of Miami because they had a good art program. And she studied the art program from the standpoint of not necessarily to teach it, but to use it somehow, either as something in an art gallery or something of that sort. But it was definitely an art education, and she took education courses so that she would have that background also. And then she decided after school, after she finished college, that she wanted to live in Arizona. And by that time, Janie and her husband and her little baby decided that they would move to Arizona. And since the two of them decided that they were going to run away from home, so to speak, we showed them, we followed them, and we came to Arizona. And let's see, she got married and they had a son. And their son was born on March 5th, which was Saul's birthday. And I said, what a way to get out of buying a birthday present. Gee, that's one of the nicest presents that anybody could ever want, is another grandchild. So anyway, we celebrated with them on Zachary's birth. And Zachary has grown up to be a nice young man. And last year, or this year rather, he started American University and in Washington, D.C., and he has decided to come back and go to the University of Arizona in Tucson. And that's what he's doing. He came back, but it was too late for him to sign up for that semester this year, so he's going to go there in the fall. And instead, he's taking some courses at Scottsdale Community College, and he got a job, and he bought himself a car, and he's ready to go. And that's the story with Zachary. Now, Beth has a daughter, and Beth is a single mom, and she wanted to have more children, and she didn't remarry and decided that she would adopt a child. And so she did. And she registered or signed up, or whatever way you do it, to adopt a child from Russia. And she decided that she would adopt a little girl. Well, when it came time to go, she asked me if I would go with her. And winter in Russia wasn't anything I was really looking forward to, since I finally got out of the winters in Omaha. But I said, yeah, I really did want to go. I thought that would be terrific. So we decided to go, and that was a marvelous, marvelous, wonderful experience. And that is where we got Annika. Annika was named for, her name is Annika Pearl, who was named for the Aunt Pearlie, who is Mother's second sister, and the mother of Manny and Fern Sperling. Okay, we now have Annika, whose birthday is March 27th, and she will be 7 years old this March 27th. And she has turned out to be an absolute delight also. And she has a lot of the coloring and looks really a lot, well, quite a bit like some of Beth's baby pictures, believe it or not. And it's been quite an experience getting her, and it's been an experience seeing her grow up. There's a lot of stories about getting her that I could tell, but I know Beth has those same stories, so I'll leave them for her to tell. But the thing I really want to add at the very end here, and I want to tell you also about Janie's remarriage to Mark Sandler, who lives in Iowa, and how happy he has made us. He's a wonderful son-in-law, and we really and truly enjoy him. And the only thing about those two is they really need to move to Arizona. We've got to get them back here. I mean, you know, their winters are tough, and I know they like 4 seasons, and I know all that, but they really got to come back here, and that's something I'm working on. And I hope I accomplish it.
They should be close with
sometime sooner. And I guess what I really want to tell you, children, is how much we love you. I love you from the bottom of my heart. I can't. This is my father's father, Samuel Feinberg, born December 21st, 1873, Panevis, Lithuania, and the family name was Davidovich. This is my father's mother, Shana Leah Stockler Feinberg. She was born March 14th, 1875 in Shot, Lithuania. This is my mother's mother, Tema Weintraub Strakowski. This is my mother's father, Menachem Mendel Max Strakowski, born, I believe, in Lodz, Poland. This is my mother, Frida Carol Strakowski Feinberg, born July 16th, 1902 in Lodz, Poland. This is my father, Robert Michael Feinberg, born December 25th, 1902, London, England.
This is my parents, Lillian Foreman Crandell, and my father, Philip Crandell. This is my father, Philip Crandell, in front of our first fur shop at 40th and Farnham in Omaha, Nebraska.
This picture was taken, I don't know when it was taken, but it was taken very early of my father's family. And I believe it was when they were already in Canada. This is the eldest. This is Dave Feinberg. This is Charles Feinberg. This is my father, Robert Feinberg. This is Joseph Feinberg. This is Bobby Shana Feinberg. This is Zeta Samuel. On his lap is Frank Feinberg, the youngest of the boys. This is Becky Rebecca Feinberg Phillips. This is Reuben Feinberg Forbes. This is Fruma, who died at a very young age. The picture was taken before Libby Dwar, the baby of the family, was born. This picture was taken in 2005 of the family. In the back row, Beth Ann, Janie Rochelle Sandler, and Mark Sandler, her husband. The bottom row, left to right, Annika Pearl Crandell, Zachary J. Berg, and they are Beth's children. Mona Crandell, Saul Crandell, and Robin Schneider, who is Janie's daughter.
I am the father of
You certainly are.
my children and grandchildren, and Mona has said everything that as far as telling you who the kids are and what they've accomplished, and I would just be saying the same things over again. But my feelings are just as deep as Mona's are about our children and grandchildren and our new grandchild, Annika, because she has a Russian origin, which kind of connects with my family and
Mine too.
and our family in coming here, right? And I feel the same way about them, and I love them dearly, and I just want them to be happy and to enjoy life and to love us because we love them dearly, and I hope and I know it will continue during our lifetime.
And I would like to add that we hope they will grow up. They are grown, but we hope they will continue to live good lives and safe lives and Jewish lives.
And in good health.